The sound of glass breaking echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. Daniel Whitmore froze in the hallway, his polished shoes sinking into a thick silence that didn't belong in a house this big. He hated silence. It reminded him of things he worked very hard to forget. In the kitchen, Maria stood trembling. Shards of a ceramic bowl scattered across the marble floor. Her hands were shaking, not from the mess, but from fear. The refrigerator door stood open behind her, its soft white light exposing neatly arranged shelves of food no one ever touched. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "What were you doing?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut. Maria swallowed. "I was just checking something, sir." "That is not your job," he snapped. "You clean." "You don't touch my food." She bent down quickly, trying to gather the broken pieces. "I'm sorry, please, I didn't mean—" "Enough," Daniel said. His chest felt tight, the familiar pressure of control slipping. "You're fired." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Maria looked up, her eyes glossy, lips parted like she wanted to explain but didn't know how. For a moment, Daniel thought she might beg. Most people did, but she didn't. She only nodded slowly. "I understand," she whispered. She removed her apron, folded it carefully, and placed it on the counter as if it still mattered. That quiet dignity irritated him more than anger ever could. Daniel turned away before he could see her leave. He told himself it was necessary. Boundaries mattered. Order mattered. His life was built on control. Control over money, over people, over pain. The staff avoided him for the rest of the day. That night, Daniel sat alone in his dining room, staring at a plate of untouched food. The mansion felt colder than usual. His phone buzzed with emails, stock updates, numbers that meant nothing in this moment. For reasons he couldn't explain, his thoughts kept returning to the fridge, to Maria's hands shaking, to the way she'd looked at the food, not with greed, but with something else. Concern? Longing? Ridiculous, he muttered. Still, sleep wouldn't come. Around midnight, Daniel walked into the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed softly. He opened it, studying the shelves. Everything was labeled, portioned, expensive, perfect. Then he noticed something odd. One container tucked in the back had been moved. Next to it sat a small plastic box, cheap, scratched, clearly not his. Inside was plain rice and a few vegetables carefully wrapped. Daniel's breath caught. He picked it up, confusion spreading through him. Why would Maria hide her food in his refrigerator? A folded note was taped to the lid. His hands tightened as he read the first line. And suddenly the mansion didn't feel big at all. Daniel sat down heavily at the kitchen table, the plastic container still in his hands. The note trembled as he unfolded it completely. "Sir, I'm sorry I touched the fridge. I wasn't stealing. My son has a medical condition that requires him to eat at specific times. I sometimes don't have electricity at home, so I kept his food cold here. I planned to remove it before you noticed. I'm deeply sorry." Daniel read it again. And again. "Electricity." "Son." The words dug into him in ways numbers never had. He thought of the refrigerator he'd replaced 3 times just because a newer model came out. He thought of the wine cellar downstairs, stocked with bottles worth more than some people's yearly income. And he thought of a woman who cleaned his floors, hiding her child's food in the back of his fridge so it wouldn't spoil. Something cracked inside him. Daniel stood abruptly and called the head of staff. "Where does Maria live?" he demanded. The man hesitated. "Sir, it's not a good area. She takes 2 buses to get here." Daniel grabbed his coat. An hour later, his luxury car crawled through dimly lit streets far from the world he knew. The buildings were old, paint peeling, windows dark. He parked near a small, run-down apartment complex. When Maria opened the door, her face drained of color. "Sir," she whispered, I can explain." Daniel held up the container and the note. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her shoulders sagged. "Because people don't like excuses from maids," she said quietly. "They like obedience." Inside, a small boy lay on a thin mattress, breathing softly. A medical machine hummed beside him. "That's my son, Lucas," Maria said. "He's 8. He has a heart condition." Daniel felt his throat tighten. The boy's chest rose and fell unevenly, like each breath was work. "How long?" Daniel asked. "Since he was born." "And his father?" Maria looked away. "He passed." Silence filled the room, heavier than before. Daniel knelt beside the boy, something he hadn't done for anyone in years. He thought of his own childhood, private schools, tutors, a father who replaced affection with checks. He stood slowly. "I was wrong," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "And I don't say that often." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "You're not fired," he continued. "If you're willing, I want to help." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "Why?" Daniel looked at Lucas. "Because humanity doesn't mean anything if it only exists when it's convenient." That night, for the first time in decades, Daniel Whitmore cried, not for loss, but for the truth he'd ignored. Life didn't change overnight, but it changed deeply. Lucas was transferred to one of the best children's hospitals in the state within days. Specialists reviewed his case. Treatments that once felt impossible suddenly became real. Maria stayed by her son's side, afraid to believe too much, afraid hope might disappear if she touched it. Daniel visited often. Not with cameras, not with announcements, just quietly. He arranged a new apartment for Maria, warm, safe, with stable electricity. He insisted she take paid time off. When she tried to refuse, he shook his head. "This isn't charity," he said. "It's responsibility." Months passed. Lucas grew stronger. He smiled more, laughed louder. One afternoon, he asked Daniel, "Are you my uncle?" Daniel smiled for the first time in years. "Something like that." Word spread quietly among the staff. The billionaire who once fired a maid, without listening, now ate lunch in the common kitchen. He learned names, stories, struggles. The mansion felt different, warmer. One evening, Daniel stood alone in the kitchen, the same place where everything had begun. He opened the refrigerator and smiled softly. Inside, alongside gourmet meals, sat a small plastic container of rice and vegetables. This time it wasn't hidden. Maria entered behind him. "Old habit," she said shyly. Daniel closed the fridge gently. "No," he replied. "A reminder." She looked at him, confused. "That success without compassion is just another kind of poverty," he said. Years later, Daniel established a foundation focused on domestic workers and their families, healthcare, education, dignity. He never put his name on the building. When asked why, he simply said, "Because the most important lessons come from people the world tells us not to see." And every time he heard a refrigerator door open, Daniel remembered the day a simple act, checking the fridge, changed his heart forever.